Welcome back and a very good morning to those who have just joined us. You are watching the final half an hour of VUCA Africa here on ANN7. Let's take a quick look at your headlines. Former Hawks boss Bernie Nklemeza has refuted reports that his appeal has been dismissed by the Supreme Court of Appeals. He also challenges the retirement claims by the police minister.
The DA in the Nelson Mandela Bay Metropolitan faces more woes as Gayton McKenzie's Patriotic Alliance pulls away from the Democratic Alliance partnerships there. This comes after the PA's preferred deputy mayor was not affected as the position is currently vacant after axing of Mongameli Bobani.
North Korean leader Kim Jong-un blasted US President Donald Trump as mentally deranged and vowed to make him pay dearly for threatening to destroy his country, hours after Trump ordered fresh sanctions over Pyongyang's weapon program. Taking a look at your top story, the South African Reserve Bank is meeting the major banks over the issue currently plaguing auditing firm KPMG. The meeting will reportedly focus on everything from potential job losses, perceived risks and interpretation of auditing regulations.
By law, the banks are required to have two auditing firms. The banks have expressed concern as the ability to rotate auditors would be put into jeopardy if KPMG South Africa had to close shop. KPMG is the joint auditor of 4 of South Africa's largest banks and currently employs over 3,500 people. Earlier, the auditing firm had apologized unreservedly for the release of the SARS Rogue Unit report. The Revenue Collectors Management has since threatened legal action over the firm's withdrawal of the report.
As KPMG saga unfolds, there seem to be some similarities in the way the Bell Pottinger saga was approached. The first similarity is that both companies fired executives working on the Gupta family-related accounts. Both were targeted despite no proof of criminality or irregularity being found in their dealings with the Gupta businesses. And both faced pressure from corporate as they cut ties with both the firms even before an official probe.
More so, why has the corporate community not spoken out at other major firms that have been found guilty of wrongdoing? For instance, why has there not been an extensive outcry over Group 5's admission to price fixing during the building of stadiums during the 2010 World Cup of Soccer? Or when international auditor PricewaterhouseCoopers were fined extensively by the UK regulator for not supplying enough audit evidence in their work on another tax company, RSM Tenon.
Now, the question that they have not answered, by the way, in that very elaborate, verbose media statement, the question was that they should have answered, or at least seek to address, was, well, what are they going to do with all other reports that they have produced by the same executives that they have now fired, when the aggrieved parties are now going to be approaching them and say, thank you very much for your admission of wrongdoing. In these 2 instances, we therefore ourselves have got an issue that we want to take up with you. Are they going to be now reversing all the reports that they have been issuing since as early as 2004?
Allegedly, KPMG was part of Brett Kebble's fraud of taking on something like 26 billion rand within 10 days during the lifetimes of Brett Kebble. To this day, the minority shareholders wanting their money back. To this day, they've failed. They've been trying to sue people like Stephen Kosser from Investec Bank and KPMG and Ellen Gray, but nothing much has come of it. What I find interesting that the state has never followed through and took those very same institutions also on for that kind of fraud. Fraud, 26 billion in 10 days, it's a huge fraud.
We're now joined on Skype by the South African Reserve Bank shareholder, Michael Dirr. Good morning to you. Thank you so much for joining us. Now, just talk to us about what can be expected to take place at the meeting between the Reserve Bank and KPMG today.
Good morning, Stephanie. Good morning, Kia. Thank you for having me on the program. You had very good coverage so far about the Reserve Bank issue, and I followed it very closely with the MPC press conference yesterday. And what I was curious about is that it slipped through the media, obviously, so far, that they issued their own press statement about the KPMG matter with the financial stability issues. And this coincides now with our efforts, because we wrote to the new CEO, Ms. Lomo, and to the new acting interim COO, Mr. Cranston a few days ago, and they replied. And now, shortly after, comes the press statement in the MPC meeting and with their own media statement, where the South African Reserve Bank says that the South African Reserve Bank has noted with concern the regrettable auditing practices and serious errors of judgment that occurred at KPMG, which led to enormous damage being inflicted on certain individuals, organizations, and the country as a whole. That is actually very true, because that also applies to us as shareholders, because KPMG made a valuation, a very dodgy valuation 2 years ago for the expropriation of the shareholders. And in this respect, I had the communication with the new CEO and COO. Now, what I think from the side, as far as I can follow it, KPMG is now the culprit, which the Reserve Bank puts out, because there's more in the back. I heard that actually maybe there are even problems with foreign currency. And I think when something is coming down, then KPMG will be the culprit, which gets everything pinned on it.
Well, taking a closer look maybe at some of the issues that will be discussed today between the banks and the South African Reserve Bank, there is a statement that it will be talking about the job losses that can occur when KPMG should close down. So let's just take a look at that. How many jobs do we think will be lost, and how can you maybe try to make that number less and maybe help those people that will be losing their jobs?
As far as I know, KPMG has over 3,000 employees in South Africa, and they are all on stake, because when the Reserve Bank now, as it's issued in its media statement, says that for any business conducted with KPMG by SARB as an institution, we reserve our rights to review our position, but have for now decided to allow the independent investigation to run its course. That means actually KPMG is now out, like Bell Pottinger, out to be potshot.
Now, what about the issue of banks by law being required to have at least 2 auditing firms working with them? I mean, the banks are a bit concerned. If, for example, KPMG South Africa closes down, will they have other options? Will the law change to accommodate the fact that there aren't many options to choose from?
Yeah, I mean, there are 3 of the 4 majors left when one is being taken out of the equation. But we have the same with the Reserve Bank. The Reserve Bank since years has PwC, which you reported yourself has other problems. And Seasware, a local auditing firm, is 2 auditing firms. And the same we have with the big commercial banks. That nowadays the KPMG is in 3 of the 4 commercial banks, of the leading 4 commercial banks in South Africa, one of the 2 auditors, and that's definitely ripping through the South African economy when this is happening in the next few days or weeks.
Now, we do know when KPMG released their report, there was people that were going for their necks, and now they've pulled back some parts of the report, and once again, they seem to be in the wrong. Why do you think this is, and what was the big problem with the report at first, and then with them retracting parts of the report?
I'm not sure actually myself, but I mean, I just follow the leads which I have, because I followed the whole stuff with Gordon since long with my Reserve Bank issue, because when he introduced the amendment, South African Reserve Bank Amendment Act in 2010, he was lying to Parliament. I mean, the thing is that I don't trust him very much. I don't trust the current setup with how KPMG gets pinned on the wall. And actually, we as shareholders are also concerned, because they made a very dodgy valuation in an 18-page pamphlet where they valued the Reserve Bank at 2 BMWs. And I think it's the same issue like with the SARS, with the rogue unit, and with Gordon, that actually the spotlight needs to be put now of the dealings of KPMG with the Reserve Bank, which they did with the valuation, which has an impact on the whole nationalization discussion and the policy issues of the ANC, and also the forthcoming discussions for the December conference.
Now, we do know that SARS, for example, wants to review certain reports that KPMG did for them as far back as the past 10 years. Is the Reserve Bank also considering reviewing like all of the reports that KPMG has put together for them the past 10 years or so?
I'm not sure how we can solve it currently. I mean, I'm still at a loss with a few issues myself. I tried to get as much information out of my sources yesterday, but it's a little bit confusing, not just to the outside world, but also to people who are in.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for joining us on Skype there. That's South African Reserve Bank shareholder Michael Dirr, just giving us some information on that meeting that's supposedly happening between the Reserve Bank and the major banks in South Africa on KPMG. That is going, or that the report that was released and then pulled back.